gathered up over years and years, and I'm going to talk through some of them and what they mean to me. This video is going to be about my all-time favourite books, I think, or at least the ones that I still think of as my favourite. We'll see. Welcome back to my channel, my bookish channel, and welcome back from Bernard Socks as well, who's settling down for the afternoon and he's complaining because I'm moving around too much. Today we're looking at my bookcase of favourite books, and this time I've been more organised and taken a pile of books away with me to sit rather than reaching up on camera all the time. So they're to hand. This is my copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I've had since I was a teenager. In fact, most of the books I've picked up today are ones that I've had since I was about 10, I think. And I can't believe they're still in one piece. I love this copy, this really pulpy copy of Dracula. When I went away to university when I was 18 in 1988, I took about 10 books with me, 10 favourite books, to go on the shelf in my campus room. It's all I could carry in my bag when I went away to Lancaster, and Dracula was one of them. I don't think I'd read it at that point, but it was something I really wanted to. And I remember avoiding all the kind of welcoming nights on campus when they used to slide beer tokens under your door to tempt you down to the bar. Well, none of that kind of appealed to me at that point. And so I stayed in my campus room during Freshers' Week for a couple of nights at least, reading Dracula on long, dark, autumnal nights. It still smells wonderful. It smells of bonfires and vanilla and old books and old bookshops. I wish I could remember where I bought this. Probably the Great Big Book Exchange in Darlington. Anyway, Dracula meant a great deal to me back then, and it's something I've gone back to ever since. Before that, before college, I read Rich by Melvyn Bragg. It was Christmas 86. No, Christmas 89. So I was at college. Anyway, the chronology hardly matters. It was a biography of the actor Richard Burton, and I just remember staying up till late into the night with this. And especially the middle bit where it presents his diaries from, I think, Christmas 1968, when he's teaching himself to write. And he's typing away in an attic in a fancy house that he and Elizabeth Taylor live in Switzerland. And she's built him this office to work in and filled it with all the best books in the world. And Richard Burton smoking and drinking and typing. And that was such a brilliant model for me for the writer's life. And so I've always been very fond of him and his slight pretensions to being a writer. But it was one of the first really massive biographies I read. And they've always been important to me. They're usually books by and about writers and actors and painters. This copy of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, I had from, I suppose, being about 16 when we did it for O-level English. And I've read this again and again and again over the years. And in my mind, it's the book that has not a single word in the wrong place. Now, that might be an effect of reading and rereading and studying and first encountering a book when you become alert to symbolism and leitmotifs and thematic stuff, just literary critical stuff. And it's a book that opens out like one of those Japanese paper flowers in water. And it's always stayed with me. I love the atmosphere of this book. I love the parties and the embarrassing scenes of confrontation and the zooming off to New York to get drunk, and the kind of reprehensible characters and the damage they do each other. It's a great book. Another one from when I was 17. This really is a video about being a teenager. My first ever Stephen King book. This is the actual copy I read walking around in the Lake District for a week in 1987, youth hosteling with my friend Natalie. And the book had been suggested by my English teacher, who thought I'd like Stephen King, and I did. It was a revelation to me, because he was an author that adults around me read. And so it seemed like a very sophisticated and adult thing to read for myself. And an attempt, I suppose, to move away from science fiction. And I know that's what my English teacher was trying to get me to do, not just read fantasy and science fiction and Doctor Who. This is such a scary book. The stuff about being in a coma and waking from a coma is just so vivid and scary, and it felt very real when I read it. And the business about the kind of crazy president who he's got to assassinate is chilling, and it gets more chilling by the year, put it that way. This is part of Stephen King's kind of apocalyptic view of the world, which I fully subscribed to when I was a teenager. I loved these books. Again, I go back to that idea that maybe an author only has to write about 3 books that you really love, and the rest you can just kind of enjoy. He doesn't have to be, or she doesn't have to be brilliant every time, or it doesn't always have to work for you every time. For me, The Dead Zone, Salem's Lot, The Shining, maybe that's about it. Maybe that's all I need from Stephen King. It, maybe, which I also read, which was new in 1987, I think, when I first read it. Now, something from when I was 15, Dune. When I was a school prefect and I was allowed to not play outside at lunchtime and playtime at school, and I could stay indoors and just read. And Dune was one of the science fiction sagas that I leapt into alongside David Eddings' The Belgariad, Anne McCaffrey's Dragon books. Dune was the most disturbing and peculiar of all of them. It really felt to me like visiting an alien planet. I was completely convinced by its natural history, the language, the culture, the religion, the history that it was presenting. And it was dark and disturbing. And I can't believe how boring I found the recent movie. How dare you take something as lurid and psychedelic and peculiar as Dune and make something boring out of it. I had a really good friend at college who adapted it for a 7-hour, 8-hour play that took place under one spotlight that just focused on the tensions and the drama between 1 or 2 characters at a time, and sketched in all the massive epic stuff around it. And it really worked. Much better than these overblown movies they keep making. I've really had it with overblown movies. One of the first Doctor Who books I read, must have been about 10, Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters. Which, again, sketches in this massive world of a prehistoric civilization that comes back to life in the present. I think Malcolm Hulke was, who only did about 6 or 7 of these novelizations, was one of the best writers they had. And his books were always ones I looked out for when I first explored this series. A Christmas Carol is there, but I'm not feeling Christmassy today. This was part of a set that came from W.H. Smith's. There were American imports of classics, and you got a box, like a cereal box, of a variety pack of 6 classics, and they seemed like very good value. And I remember having my first copies of Alice in Wonderland and A Christmas Carol and Mark Twain books and things like that in these. And I guess they were like economy versions of them. They smell American somehow, like American comics. Anyway, Nicholas and the Gang by Sempe and Goscinny, or vice versa. These were hilarious French books, translated obviously, about kids at school who seemed just like us at school and behaved like us. That's right, Goscinny is the writer, René Goscinny. And the illustrations are by Sempe, whose pictures I've collected books of since. They were anarchic and wonderful, and I think have kind of vanished from view these days. I think there was a fancy edition. I know there was a fancy edition that Thames and Hudson did for adults like me who'd grown up with these. But maybe the anarchy of them is out of date now. That they're not aspirational enough or inspirational, all those things that kids' books try to be these days. These weren't telling us how to be better people. They were telling us how to be worse behaved kids, which we loved them for. Nicholas and his friends really weren't living their best. Well, they were living their best lives, but not in the way that the adults would want them to. John Christopher's The Guardians, which was a book that we read at school when I was 12, before I knew about the tripods or his other books. This was a book all about class, about the kids who lived in the conurbation, the conurb, under a dome, a kind of concrete new town like ours. And the posh people lived outside in the countryside with horses and a kind of agrarian lifestyle. And it was about the meeting of worlds, slightly homoerotic, as I always thought John Christopher was when I was about 12 or 13. I couldn't work out why. Maybe I was just reading into it in the way that you do through these male friendships as people meet across different worlds. All of his books were great. The one that was kind of post-pandemic or post-apocalyptic, empty world, with the 3 kids running about in emptied London, was fabulous too. And The Tripods, of course, is amazing. I've covered this really carefully in sticky pack plastic at some point. I love the fact that I did that. I always wanted those plastic covers, here's one, that school libraries had, town libraries had, for books. And I dreamt about getting a whole load and putting all my books in plastic covers. It seems a bit obsessive even for me. The last one in my pile is another Doctor Who, The Demons, which back then when I was 10, and still now is my favourite of all the Doctor Who books. There's something about the contained world of the demons and this village where they get stuck, and the Master is posing as the vicar, and he's calling up what looks to be like the devil to menace everyone. It's just one of the most delicious and character-filled and magical of Doctor Who books, I think. Yep. So this is a pile of absolute favourites. And if I was to go on a long trip somewhere, I'd be quite happy to grab these and take them off with me and read them all over again, I think. Even Dune, which seems like a big investment of time. I I returned to the Dune series in recent years and read the fourth book, which I never had, because it had the same cover, the same style cover as this one. So I'd always had it with me as part of this lovely collection of 1960s covers. And the fourth one is terrible. It's just about a big fat man being pushed off a bridge very slowly, the whole book. Science fiction leaves me bewildered sometimes, I think, more and more as I get older. I prefer things scaled down, definitely, as opposed to the kind of big cosmic stuff. I think, anyway. Maybe I'll be proved wrong on that and read something massive and cosmic and wonderful quite soon. Anyway, that's enough for today. See you soon.